this button. All right. Well, Kufar Akbar, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Cross and the Crescent discussion group. We are a YouTube streamed show that comes on every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time till around 6 p.m. Standard Time. And we are dedicated to rightly dividing the truth between Islam and Christianity. We have panel discussions. We get people to come up on stage and they provide opinions and information about everything that we talk about. And usually that deals with mainly Islam, but we also do, like the last show that we did here was an apologetic on who and when the gospel, who wrote the gospels and when more specifically the gospels were written. And we figured out that they were written really early and exactly by those people who are given attribution to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I haven't seen any comments on there. I don't really go in and read comments that are made on those shows, but I haven't seen any negative comments. I'd like to somebody just opine just for once, asking, a difficult question on that. Well, how do you know that this was? I really wish somebody would use some type of intellectual or academic prowess and try to challenge, because sometimes you feel like you're sitting in a phone booth, not a phone booth, a echo chamber. There we go, echo chamber on the show. And I like dissenting opinions. Okay, so today, what are we doing today? Well, we were supposed to have Paul join us, and he was going to discuss this topic that I have right here on the screen, almost coming up. Right there, this topic. He was going to talk about the Hijra in France. And last time we had the show, we had him. He was supposed to go last, and we ran out of time. Rad went a little over, not a little over. He went way over on what he was talking about to begin with. But that, that's all good. And then, of course, I sit there and bloviate for quite a while. And then we were supposed to have Paul, but the problem with having Paul on, Paul wouldn't have had enough time to present. But he was supposed to present this morning or this afternoon, but not here. And let's see, the second thing that we're going to do today, let me get this over here, is we're going to talk about Meccan mythology. And I'm going to tell you why we're going to talk. We're going to beat that horse to death if it hasn't already. And then we're going to talk about a character, an Islamic character that has been out of the news for quite a while, who just happened to make it back in the news this week. I read an article on him this morning. I was like, how in the heck, where's this guy been? And if you guys, have any of you guys heard of Anjem Chowdhury? You guys ever heard of this guy?
Oh yeah, the jihadi from UK.
Yeah, he got himself arrested again.
Oh, again?
Yeah, darn. Sorry to see him get pulled off the streets. Terrorist sponsoring piece of garbage. But we'll get to that soon enough. Okay, well, since Paul isn't here yet, I don't know. And if you guys don't know Paul gets on Usama Dakdak's show on Saturday evenings, and they start they start at 10 p.m. Yeah. Who starts the show at 10 p.m.? Usama does. Usama starts at 10 p.m. and they go at least until midnight. Now, I've been on that show presenting material before, not when he was streaming on YouTube, but when he was just only on Blog Talk Radio. And I tell you what, that's a heavy lift. And I'm an hour. I'm Central Standard Time, and he's in Eastern Standard Time, or that's the time that they start anyway. And that's just that makes for a very long Sunday morning, sitting in church when you stay up that late. At least for me, anyways, because I'm getting older. All right, let's go ahead and jump into today's topic, and that is Meccan mythology. Now, the reason why I'm calling it Meccan mythology now, as opposed to, hold on, I gotta sneeze. Sorry. Hold on. I hate that. When you go to sneeze and you can't sneeze. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Pretty good. I made it.
Yeah, we were just talking behind your back. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, sorry. Lost track of time.
I decided to just go ahead and start, and then you can do yours once I get done with my part. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, and hopefully I won't take an hour and a half like we did last week doing this.
That's
Okay,
right.
so today we're going to be doing Meccan mythology, and here's the reason why. I firmly believe that Islam itself is like a three-legged stool. You have the Quran, you have Muhammad, and you have the city of Mecca. And if you remove any of those legs from that stool, what's going to happen to the stool? It goes tumbling down. And, we could sit here and argue all day long about the theological suppositions that we find in the Quran, or we can, talk about all the problems that are in the Quran, how it's anachronistic, how it's historically incoherent, how it's scientifically laughable, all those things. It's still not going to bother a Muslim because they believe the Quran, and the Quran has to be right. And in the end, you're making theological arguments, things that you cannot necessarily prove from a scientific perspective, I guess would be a great way to answer that. The second one is Muhammad. And here you hit a blind spot. Anytime that you mention the name Muhammad, it's automatically World War III. Whoop, up come the defenses, and you are not going to say, well, wait a second. Muhammad did this. Muhammad had people killed for criticizing him. Muhammad enslaved people, traded slaves, owned slaves. Muhammad raped women, encouraged his men to rape. And you can do all of this, say all of these things, and whoop, up goes that fence. But that's okay because it was a different time. It was a different place, don't you see?
And it's okay because it's Muhammad.
Right. It's Muhammad. Muhammad's the prophet of Allah. We all know this. Why? Because he has the Quran. We know the Quran is true because the Quran says it's true. We all know these things are to be true because we can prove them using circular reasoning. But here's the problem. The problem is with Mecca. This is where you cannot defend this. You have to provide evidence. You are forced to provide evidence for your historical arguments. And here is where Islam falls apart. Now, I gave this slideshow. I presented this on Chris Claus's channel a couple weeks ago, but I've taken some things out and I've added some things in, so you can't say, well, I'm just doing the same exact thing, because I am to an extent, but not entirely. But has any of you guys ever used Chat GGP, that artificial intelligence thing?
Yeah, I did.
I don't like.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It failed my challenge. I told it to do a surah like the Quran.
Well, if you ask it questions about Islam, for example, could you please provide a list of all of the moral failings of Muhammad? And it won't do it. It say, well, it all depends on we don't want to. Yes, it won't do it. However, some things that are of historical value or are of non-theological value, it'll provide you information. So I go in there a lot, and I just ask some of the silliest questions. And one of them was, can you tell me the height? How tall is the mountain of Marwa? And it couldn't tell me. I think it gave me Safa, but it wouldn't tell me Marwa. I had to go look for that one. But anyway, that's in this slideshow here. But anyway, there's some things that it can and it cannot do. So I went in and I asked it this question. I know, you're all surprised. Here's the question. Hold on, let me make this big. Here's the question I asked it. What evidence is there that Mecca existed in the 7th century? And here's the answer. Now listen to the answer this thing provides. The existence of Mecca in the 7th century is supported by several lines of evidence, historical, archaeological, textual sources. Here's some key pieces. Historical accounts. The city of Mecca is mentioned in historical accounts from the 7th century, Islamic tradition, and early Muslim sources such as the Quran, Hadith, sayings. Actually, okay. Number one, it's not supported by any historical accounts from the 7th century outside of Islamic traditions. Notice there's a period there. It says Islamic traditions and early Muslim sources, such as the Quran. Okay, notice how it does not default to anything else other than Islamic sources. Now, if we were to say that the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true, and we know that all of Christian history is true because of what Christians say about it, we wouldn't believe that. You have extra sources or sources outside. You have extra biblical sources. You have sources that are not Christian. You have actually atheistic sources. Bar Ehrman will attest to the fact or many of the facts that are listed in the Bible. He doesn't disagree with that. But the existence of Mecca, folks, there's nothing attested to its existence in the 7th century. It says that Mecca is on a trade route. It is well documented. We're going to be talking about that. It says that there's archaeological evidence. Excavations conducted in and around Mecca have uncovered artifacts, structures that date back to the 7th century.
Where?
I'm going to show you my next slide. You're going to go, what? And then a pilgrimage tradition, which proves nothing about Mecca, because it says the annual Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca is a central pillar of Islam and has been practiced for centuries. But it doesn't talk about something. There's no evidence that occurred prior to the 7th century. Okay, now look at my next question. List the archaeological excavations conducted in Mecca that date back to the 7th century. Now notice what it says here. Right here. It says archaeological evidence, archaeological excavations conducted in and around Mecca uncovered artifacts, and structures that date back to the 7th century and earlier. Okay. Then I ask it. Watch this. I ask, list the archaeological excavations. Now look at what the answer is, folks. You're going to laugh at this. Watch this. What's the answer? To the best of my knowledge, as of September 2021 knowledge of cutoff date, there haven't been extensive archaeological excavation conducted within the city of Mecca. Now, how can you say here? How can you say here? The excavation uncovered structures that date back to the century. Let's see.
It's called. This is just a lack of logic that the average Muslim has.
There's nothing there.
Put this together.
There's nothing there. Right. You're right. And nobody's exactly it. If you question it, what do you call? Islamophobe. But look, there haven't been extensive archaeological excavation conducted within the city of Mecca. Period. And then it lists some. However, I can provide some archaeological findings in the vicinity of Mecca that shed light, not in Mecca, but in the vicinity, evidently. So when we look at the difference between the vicinity and Mecca itself, there is a big, I could say that, we find archaeological evidence in Medina. That is in the Hijra. So that is the city of Mecca. Yeah, you can make that argument, but it's not Mecca. And that's the point. It's not Mecca. Why? Because Mecca didn't exist in the 7th century. Look at it. It says Mina is a valley located near Mecca. The cemetery is an ancient cemetery where several of the prophets are buried, and we're going to be talking about that during the show. So the bottom line is that you go in and use this artificial intelligence stuff, and even that, it's supposed to be some of the most amazing search software out there. It's what's the word? Not it's contradictory. It says, well, it's well documented in archaeological excavations, and it says there haven't been in our archaeological excavations. So which one is it? Well, you can't make that argument anymore. All right, so we use several references for this presentation. The first one, of course, is Jay Smith. A lot of the slides that I have here come from Jay's class that he taught out at Veritas University this past spring. It was a graduate level class. I didn't take it for any credit. I just took it because I wanted to steal Jay's slides. And he says, as long as you give attribution, you can use the slides any way you want to. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm using them any way I want to. And of course, I'm using evidence from Dan Gibson's book, Chronic Geography. I got some of the information from nabatea.net. And then there's a book called Islam in the Light of History by Dr. Amari. There's a shortened version of this. I believe there's an article. The article is, I think, like 60 pages, which is the short version of the book. But if you want to get the book is online right there at that link. And then, of course, Peter Townsend's book, The Meccan Mystery, which I don't have up right here, but I would highly recommend that book.
Oh, that's a good book. That's a good book. That
It
really
is.
good.
He's got 3 of them out. He's got The Meccan Mystery, Nothing to Do with Islam. Hold on, here we
I
are.
like that one too.
Let's see, Questioning Islam, and then Nothing to Do with Islam. So if you ever want to get some good reads that are just chock full of information, Peter Townsend is a wealth of information. Okay, so let's move on. Now, why is this important? When we look at civilizations, religions, they have to be built upon history, things that you can demonstrate. You have to, read from, of course, you're going to get it from your religious documents, but you're also going to be able to demonstrate it using different sources of historical data. And you can get this from all the different types of historical data, whether it's documentary, and even in the documentary, you have different genres. You can get it in archaeological digs. You can get it in artifacts. You have other ways to testify to the veracity of your religion. But let's just play a game here. Let's say we're doing the history of Italy. And I lived in Italy for 4.5 years, and it seems like I'm bragging about it. It is because I am bragging about it. I loved living in Italy. When I was in the army, it was actually when I was in Italy, and it is a beautiful country. The people there are rude, crude, and unacceptable at times, but it is a great country, and I love my Italian brothers. But let's say I'm reading a history of Italy, and I find information about Bella Napoli, city I lived in for 3 years, and then now you have Mount Vesuvio, and what was the name of that coast? The Costa Amalfi, the Amalfi Coast there. I mean, it's just a beautiful place. And then you read about Milano. This is like the fashion center of the world. Now that's up in the northern Italy, where if anybody doesn't realize it, the people in the northern Italy don't claim the people that live in southern Italy. And
Yes, they don't.
It's like people in New York don't claim the people that live in Mississippi or something like,
No. The people in New York State don't claim the people in New York City.
Okay, that's even a better analogy. Thank you. Okay, so you got Milano, you got Napoli, then you got Firenze, you have Florence, where you have all the art there from the beginning of the Renaissance, and then you have Venezia, Venice, where you have all the canals, and you have authors that talk about Pisa, where you got a tower that sits a little sideways. And then you have people that talk about Genoa, which is up in northern. You'd have all of these places mentioned in history, but nobody mentions in all of these places Roma. Nobody mentions Rome. Exactly, Andrew. Andrew, right on the head, right here. All roads lead to Rome. Every time you turn around, you see the sign: Rome this way, Rome that way, Rome this way. All signs lead to Rome, but nobody mentions Rome. Do any of you all think that would be problematic? If we were reading about Roman history, do you think that it would be problematic? Or I'm sorry, Italian history, and nobody mentions Rome, that would be problematic?
I mean, I would think so.
Yeah, it would crush Italian history. Nobody mentions Rome, but here's Rome is supposed to be the center of their culture, but you don't have anybody mentioning it. This is the same thing with Mecca, folks. A lot of people can't wrap their minds around this. But this is true. This is the same thing with Mecca. You have all of these cities around Mecca, Yathrib. You have Najran. You have and we're going to go through them, but none of them, and they're all mentioned, and they all have a mountain of archaeological evidence to them, but nobody mentions Mecca. Really? It's like, shut your mouth. We don't. Hold on. I'm darn it. I have that. I was going to do that. Be quiet. Don't mention Mecca. It's like there's like some vast conspiracy to keep Mecca a secret. That's what we have.
Never heard of it because it didn't exist.
Well, that's the conclusion that you have to draw if you are going to use the historical method. If we did all of this, if we had all of this information about Italy and nobody mentions Rome, well, why is that? Maybe because it didn't exist. We know it existed. Why? Because everybody mentions it.
I mean, the oppressed peoples mention it. They that don't like Rome. The Hebrews, the Jews mention it. The Germans mention it. You can name a culture in Europe. They mention it because they fought them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You have all of this evidence outside of Italian history that mention it. Also, there were no ports or trade in Mecca. Yeah. We're okay. We're getting to that. Give me a couple minutes and we'll get to it. I promise you. Okay, so the thing with Mecca, I mean, when we think of, and again, here you have Roman mythology, we have ways to prove that Rome existed all the way up into the 2nd, 3rd century BC. We have the Colosseum, which was built by the Jews, oh, by the way. I don't know if you guys realize that when Vespasian carried him off. Titus and Vespasian, one of them, I can't remember which. They're the ones that built the Colosseum. But you have all kinds of other archaeological excavations that can be made to demonstrate the historicity, thank you, Paul, of Rome, and all kinds of artifacts that go along with it. And it's all over. It is ubiquitous. Did I say that word right? Ubiquitous?
I think you did.
Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. And we have all kinds of writings that corroborate the existence of Rome and the Roman Empire, and also other empires or other people groups within Roman culture itself. And we have Josephus and of course Tacitus writing. Then you have Egypt, the same thing. You have all kinds of archaeological digs that demonstrate it existed for thousands of years. The last one that I love is the excavational dig at Avaris. That's this right there. And Avaris demonstrates that you had a Semitic people group living in Egypt about, 1400, 1500 BC. Gee whiz, I wonder what that lines up. I don't know. Maybe the book of Exodus? Let's see here. What does this say? Non omnis moea. I don't. Okay, what does it say? Guys, here's a resource that you might find versus the only archaeological stuff ever dug in Mecca. Okay. Can you post it? Just a second, I'll send. Okay, good. Yeah, I'd like to see that. I think it's the oldest archaeological evidence that we have for that is a sandal found in an old Ottoman fort dated to the 12th century AD, not 7th century. Okay, but we have Avaris, and then you have, of course, all kinds of, not cuneiform, what is it? Hieroglyphic, there we go. Hieroglyphics that describe all kinds of events that happened in Egyptian history. You have Greek history, you have the Acropolis there, all kinds of archaeological digs that you can that demonstrate the historicity of the Greek Empire itself. We have so many artifacts that they had dug up during the preparation for the 2000 Olympics, that they had to start putting them in subway stations. I mentioned that before. And then we have all kinds of Greek literature to go along with it. And then Chinese, all the way in the Far East, you have all kinds of evidence demonstrating the historicity of their civilizations. When you compare this to Islamic civilization, the only thing we have is 200 years after its supposed founding by Muhammad at his death in 632. Okay, so let's look at Islam's early expansion. First off, You have Muhammad's empire when he dies in 632, encompasses this area right here. It's called the Hijaz, and that extends clear down to Yemen and the Arabian Sea, westward up along the Arabian coast to the Red Sea, and then all the way eastward into the central part of Arabia. Now, the second part of their Islamic history is called the Rashidun period. The Rashidun period is the time period of the four rightly guided caliphs. This would be Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, and Ali. Now, here's something that you need to, if you don't hear anything else in this first couple minutes of this presentation, listen to this part. Now, look at how far Islamic empire had expanded under these four caliphs. It expands all the way over here into Tripoli in North Africa and eastward into almost to the Indus River, over here in the Hindu Kush, over here into Afghanistan, and all of Arabia, and all the way up into Asia itself. Now, here's what we need to understand. None of these people, listen to this, none of these people who were being conquered wrote, we have not found any writing referencing these conquests of these four rightly guided caliphs. In other words, when Omar conquered Alexandria, Egypt, and burned the library down, nobody in Egypt thought to write down, say, hey, the Muslims came here in the name of Allah and their messenger Muhammad under the Caliph Omar to destroy our state. Nobody wrote that down. Nobody records outside of Islamic history the four rightly guided caliphs. The only people that are mentioned or start to get mentioned is during the Umayyad dynasty under Muawiyah. And Muawiyah is referenced as the leader of the faithful. And that's it. It doesn't say anything about Muhammad, doesn't say anything about Islam, nobody mentions the Quran, nothing. Nothing is there, folks. Think of how important that is. Outside of Islamic literature, you have no references to the five most pivotal people, excuse me, in Islamic history. No mention of Muhammad, no mention of Abu Bakr, no mention of Omar, Uthman, or Ali.
Uthman, Ali, none of them are mentioned in any historical documents. It's really, I mean, when you're trying to do research, this is frustrating. Let me tell you, people, it is frustrating because the only place I can find them is in Islamic documents, and I'd like to read it from somebody else's perspective, and I can't find it.
This is right. Look at this. This is right here. This is it. It's why? It's because they are a myth. The Caliph Muawiyah is 661, I believe, is when he became caliph. He was an Arab, yeah. And guess where he was? Look where he was. Where was the capital for the Umayyad dynasty? It's clear up here in Damascus, folks. Right here. It's in Damascus. Look where Mecca is. Damascus, Mecca. That's 1,000 miles.
And they don't even know what desert life is like because they describe, even in the Quran that describes Mecca, there's olive trees. Sorry.
Okay, we're going to get into that. Rob. Okay, would you guys quit? Look at you guys getting ahead of me. I got tours. No water. Exactly. Give me a minute here. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. No, we didn't get your link. No,
it might not allow him to post links. The YouTube might not.
Okay, I tell you what. Go do this. Eric Taffer at gmail.com. If you can email those to me, that link to me, there's my email address. If you send that to my email address, and then go ahead and send an alert there in chat when you do. I'll try to bring it up. Okay. Don't like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, folks. Get that lithogram, however you pronounce it, up and running. Okay. So when we look at uh, Islam itself, number one, there's no evidence outside of the sources for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century. There's no archaeological evidence for it, for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century. There's no manuscript evidence for it outside of Islam in the 7th century. And there's no corroborating, what I mean by Quranic evidence, internal evidence for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century. And I'll talk about that. And there's no cartological evidence, and cartological evidence being map evidence. It's not on any map. Mecca does not appear on, are you ready for this? Mecca doesn't appear on a map until the year 900 AD. When did Muhammad die? 632. Folks, that is, what is that, 200, 632, 268 years, is that? Am I right on 268 years? Before Mecca even makes it to a map, and it's supposed to be this major trading center? The bottom line is Islam has no foundational history. You kick that leg out from that three-legged chair, and the whole thing comes tumbling down. When we look at Mecca, and why is Mecca important? Why is Mecca important? Number one, Adam and Eve are supposedly cast down to Mecca. Let's see, a guy does 13 presentation on these. Okay, I'm reading this. Hold on. I very much doubt it's 7th century, much less pre-7th century. Email it to me, brother. Okay, so Adam and Eve were cast down to Mecca. This is where Abraham and Ishmael supposedly rebuilt the Kaaba. Now, folks, this is 2000 BC. Now, think about this. Think about the amount of writing that has been dedicated to the life of Abraham.
Sorry, Abraham was never there.
Well, but think about, Paul, when people start describing Abraham's life, where he went, where he lived, who he interacted with, who
they say that, and they say the names of the towns, they say the names of the places he's been to, they talk about the people he met, they even have names of the people he met. Right. And there's no desert story like that.
Yeah, so people, I mean, you have entire schools of thought that have dedicated their careers to the history of Abraham and learning everything they can about his life. And no one even mentions the fact that he went down into the Arabian desert for however long the time period was with Ishmael. Nobody brings this up. No. No. Are you kidding me? This begs credulity, folks. I mean, how dare you require me to believe something that is so blatantly false, so demonstrably false? The other thing about Mecca, it's supposed to be the mother of all cities, described in the Quran, 42:7. This is where you have all of these pagan religions that existed there. We should have some type of evidence for those pagan religions. Somebody mentioned.
Wait. You said 42:7, but is the word Mecca actually in 42:7?
No, it's just the mother of all cities, where Muhammad lived, where the messenger lived.
Is the word Mecca actually in the Quran?
Once, yeah. It's in the Quran once. We're getting to it, Paul. Give me some time, brother. Okay, this is where Muhammad lived, began his prophethood. This is where hundreds of prophets are buried. This is where you have 1.8 billion people. They bow towards this place 5 times a day. This is where every Muslim is required to visit at least once in their lifetime. So when you think of Mecca, Mecca is essential to Islam. This is why I say it's a three-legged stool. You have Muhammad, Quran, Mecca. You take any of those 3 things away, you do not have Islam. And this is where why I'm going to continue to beat on this horse until people start waking up and realizing that, hey, we could sit here and we had what's his nuts, Hamza. We were doing a thing on Hamza Mayed a couple of weeks ago, and Hamza's like, well, did you know that the people, the poets within Mecca said that Muhammad was producing the best poetry?
Does he not know his own series?
Where are you getting? You want to ask somebody, like, where are you getting your information? Where did you get this? Oh, it's right there in this. It's right there in the Hadith literature.
No, it's not.
It just amazes me how obtuse people can be. Okay, when we compare this to biblical history, nobody doubts the location of Jerusalem, dating clear back into the 11th century. No one doubts the writings of Jewish scribes during, when they describe land features within the country of Israel and even outside of Israel itself also. No one doubts the locations described by the prophets in Israel today. No one doubts the geography is presented in the Gospel of Luke. When we think about Luke, Luke is actually called a first-rate historian by secular scholars. All right, so here is Mecca right here. And when we look at Mecca, it mentions this place down here called Marib, and here's Najran. And when we compare a place called Najran, because this route right here, this is a route that Gallus took when he was invading Yemen. And his exploits and this travel was recorded by a Greek historian by the name of Strabo in the first century, I believe it is. This occurred. Now, on the way to Najran, he passes right through the region where Mecca would be. And Strabo does not mention anything about Mecca. Here this entire army was being deprived. They were starving to death is what they were doing. And so they would be shaking down every town, every village, and asking them, hey, give us information about it. Somebody would have mentioned Mecca. But nobody did. But when we look at the city of Najran, it's 400 miles from Mecca. Has anybody ever heard of Najran before? Have any of you guys heard of this city? I mean, it's supposed to be on this historic trade route going from Aden all the way up to Gaza, and it's supposed to be one of the stuff. It's a very insignificant city. What's that?
Yeah, it's in Yemen, so we probably haven't heard of it.
Yeah,
we don't hear much about Yemen.
It's a very innocuous city. It's insignificant compared to Mecca. But yet, when you go there today, it's sitting on top of a mountain of archaeological evidence and artifacts. And the reason why is because they're very well preserved. Why? Because it's in a desert and there's no moisture. So things are very well preserved there. And this is what we find. And what we find in Najran is listed by Strabo. Strabo lists Najran, which is an insignificant place compared to Mecca on their route going from Egypt into Yemen. Strabo lists it. All kinds of other historians and cartographers list it. It's listed on the trade route documents. It's actually, we even have records of the bishop there who was martyred there prior to Muhammad. So we have records from that city. And it's nothing more than a hamlet. It's considered insignificant compared to Mecca. But when you compare the evidence for the existence of Najran, which is an insignificant little city out in the middle of the desert, and you compare that to the evidence that we have for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century, there is no comparison. Why? Because there's nothing that we have from Mecca. In Najran, yes, we have all kinds. So we have all kinds of evidence for a very insignificant city, whereas we have nothing for the mother of all cities. So how do we determine historical facts? Well, you have documentary evidence, of course, and they're well preserved there in the desert because of the dry climate. So we have all kinds of evidence from the Sasanian Empire, from the Persian Empire, from the Byzantine Empire, from all those empires throughout the region. Why? Because of the conditions. You have to look at the reliability of the author, the time that the information is written down, and to the time that we have the first extant copies of them. So the time and the place in which they were written down. You have to look at the widespread distribution of the document themselves. And when we think of written documents, they trump oral traditions all the time, every time. So when we think of the Quran, or I'm not sorry, the Quran, but when we think of Mecca, it's not on any of the trade route descriptions. It's not on any of the formal geographical conditions. It's not in the gazetteers. The gazetteers are informational pamphlets that were developed by these empires when they were advising their military commanders to go out into certain regions, and it would tell them about what language they speak, what their religious practices were, what the geography was like. It would talk about some of the mores, the cultural mores, so they wouldn't, get themselves in trouble by, committing some type of horrendous offense that would offend the people. So all of these gazetteers are still available. They're like geographical dictionaries. I have it right there. Then, of course, you got correspondence, letters. Nobody in any of these things mentions Mecca. And then, of course, you have archaeological evidence demonstrating the existence of places for, I don't know, like old mosques, for example, that face the wrong direction, for example. And then, of course, you have maps and then artifacts that go along with it. This is how history is done, folks. You use all of these things to do it. But Mecca, you don't have any primary documents, written sources mentioning Mecca in the 7th century. You don't have any artifacts. Look at the date there, the 12th century. Muhammad lived in the 7th century, 6th and 7th century. You don't have any archaeological evidence because all of it has been destroyed. And I'm going to show you a picture here in a couple minutes that clearly demonstrates this. But we have significant evidence of civilizations to the north of Mecca. We have significant evidence of civilizations to the west of Mecca across the Red Sea. We have significant evidence east of Mecca and south of Mecca, but we don't have any evidence for Mecca. So when we think of the evidence that exists for Mecca, this is derived from secondary and tertiary oral sources 2 centuries removed. And what I mean by that is the Quran, the Hadith literature. Number one, Mecca is only mentioned in the Quran one time. Number two, the Hadith literature that supposedly provides all of this history about Mecca and its surrounding areas is not compiled and put into a written form until 870, somewhere around 8. I think it's 870 by Bukhari. Bukhari is the first one, and then you have Muslim, Al-Nasi, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Sunan Abu Dawud, and where the other ones are. You don't have that until after 870. And the earliest extant manuscript that we have of the Hadith literature is 400 years removed from Muhammad. So who has a bigger problem for their historicity? Christianity or Islam? Of course, Islam. Thank you for playing along. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's see here. Islamic evidence for Mecca is derived mainly from the Quran, which was written in the 5th century, because we have a Quran that was actually written before the Quran. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Sana manuscript. Who's heard of the Sana manuscript?
Well, you've introduced it, yes.
Yeah, the Sana manuscript, carbon dated to, I think it was like 478 or something like that. And it has, it's a palimpsest, meaning that it was written, you have an underwriting that was wiped off, and then it was written, and then a new text written above it. And the new text does not match the underwriting. I would highly encourage you to go look up the Sana manuscript and the evidence for that. It clearly demonstrates that the Quran was a development over time, but I'm not even going to argue that right now because we're just looking at the evidence for Mecca. Then you have, of course, the biography of Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham, and that's dated to 200 years after the death of Muhammad. So 200 years after the death of Muhammad, we have somebody describing these places that supposedly existed in the 7th century. This is the 9th century, folks. Muhammad lived in the 7th, 6th, and 7th century. And then, of course, you have all the Hadith literature. Oh, I do have it written here. But this was developed mainly during the Abbasid Empire when it starts to decline in 861. Now, look at the date here. Guys, this is 200 and some change, 230 years after the death of Muhammad. So this Hadith literature starts to be written down during the decline of the Abbasid Empire. Now, here's the fact that I learned from Peter Townsend's book. And I didn't realize this, but the Jews, when they were living in that in the region in around Baghdad, because the Umayyad Empire was in Damascus, and then when the Abbasids took over, I believe it was 750ish, somewhere around there, the Abbasids moved the capital to Baghdad. So now you're in Baghdad, and you have this explosion of a Hadith literature being developed, and the Hadith literature is very similar, culturally anyway, to Talmudic traditions, the oral traditions of the Jews. And then you have the Babylonian Talmud, being developed at this time. So the Muslims, as they move into this area and start to gain control of this area, they start seeing what the Jews are doing. They see what the Jews are doing and say, hey, let's do that. And if you notice, oh, by the way, many of the later editions of the Hadith literature, meaning the Hadith that come late, are much longer than the earlier ones. So where did all this new additional information come from? Not the sources. This is what we call embellishment. Anyway, what else do we have here? We have Bukhari. Okay, I talked about Bukhari being written down 870. We have Muslim 875, Al-Nasi 915, Abu Dawud 888, Tirmidhi 892, and Sunan Ibn Majah 877. So you have essentially you have 6 to 7 generations of material that is being developed before it's written down. What is the likelihood of this being accurate? None. It can't. I mean, it's almost no way that this stuff is going to be
Disneyland. That's about as accurate as Disneyland.
Yeah, you might as well just say Disneyland existed back then. Okay, so according to the Quranic traditions, this Mecca is the place of prophet, but it has to have vegetation. But in order to have vegetation, you have to have water. What else does it say? What does the literature say about Mecca? It says that it has a parallel valley, and this is in Ibn Hisham of Bukhari. Let me make this bigger. I'm sorry, I can't hardly see this. I want to make sure you can see the sources. So it's supposed to have a parallel valley. It does not have a parallel valley. Safa Mara have shrines atop them, according to Ibn Hisham from the Sirah. It's supposed to have a stream going through it. It doesn't have a stream. You know why it doesn't have a stream?
It's a desert.
It's a desert. It doesn't have any water in it. It's supposed to have fields. What do fields need? Water. It doesn't, and dirt. It doesn't have any. It's supposed to have trees. And I promise you, if you go into Mecca today and you start digging in some undisturbed soil, if you want to call it that, you are not going to find the pollens or spores of trees, of the existence of trees there. You're not going to do it.
You might get arrested for daring to dig, too.
Oh, yeah. How dare you try to demonstrate the veracity of our literature? It's supposed to have grass. It doesn't have any grass there. Why? It doesn't have any water. I'm supposed to have fruit trees. No fruit trees. Why? Because it doesn't have any water. You're supposed to have clay and loam. This is dirt, tillable soil, and you do not have that. It's supposed to grow grapes, grain, pomegranates. It's not there. Why? Because there's no water. It's supposed to have olive trees. Olive trees don't exist until you get way up north around in the Mediterranean region. It's supposed to have mountains overlooking the Kaaba. There's no mountains overlooking the Kaaba. The Mecca is on a plain. It's not in a valley. And where are the pagans? The pagans, the mushrikun, were supposed to raise livestock. And one of the things that Muhammad wrote against the mushrikun was they used to clip the ears of their livestock. Nobody is raising livestock in Mecca. Why? Because there's no water. No water, no food. No food, no livestock. It's that simple. It's not in a valley. It's near, and here's the thing: its nearest mountains are 2 miles away. And there's a hadith that suggests that they were observing a battle from the mountains in Mecca.
Yes,
and it's 2 miles. You can't see that far, but yet there they are. Now, when we look at the Quran itself and where it positions other cities or other people groups, you have 2 of them that are named, or 3 of them that are named. The Quran itself only has 65 geographical references. In the entire Quran, you only have 65 references to specific locations. Now we'll look at the numbers here. Of those 65, 54 of these references are 600 miles away. Let me say that again. Of the 65 geographical references in the Quran, 54 of those geographical references that are in the Quran are 600 miles away from Mecca. It only names 9 different places entirely, and mostly it's just referring to people groups. When you look at Ad, look where Ad is. It's clear up here by Petra. It mentions Thalmud 24 times. This is your Nabatean culture. And then it mentions the people of Midian. Midian's mentioned 7 times. So you add these numbers up, that comes to 54. Am I right on that? It's 47 plus 7 is that's 54. So it mentions all of these people. It's 600 miles from Mecca, and of the 65 places that the Quran mentions, 54 of them are 600 miles away. Why is that? Why is that? Maybe it's because it is opining the Quran, Mecca didn't exist, and it was up here someplace originally. And I'm not going to say it was Petra, or I'm not going to say it was Jerusalem, or I'm not going to say it's someplace, something like Basra or whatever. I'm not going to say that. But what I am going to say, and what I'm trying to make sure that you all understand here, is that this Quran was written describing places and people groups that are 600 miles away from the place where it pretends to originate at. It's too far away, period. When we look at the Hadith writers were geographically ignorant of southern Arabia. When you look at the later Hadith, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, they're much more detailed. Ooh, gee whiz, I wonder why that is. Embellishment. And I just mentioned that they were able to watch a mountain or a battle 2 miles away or over a mile away. Safa and Marwa are very high peaks with a valley in between them. That's not true. Safa and Marwa are nothing but big old rocks. Ishaq claims that Mecca and the Kaaba had many trees, had so many trees that it had to have a clearing project done. And we know that's impossible. Why? Because there are no trees. And we think of his warriors, Muhammad's warriors, his henchmen, they're buying land evidently up in Syria. And that's 800 miles. Well, why are they doing that? Why are you, if you live in Mecca and you work for, why are you buying land clear up in Syria?
Because you don't want to live in the desert.
Well, I mean, it's supposed to be, these are the contemporaries of Muhammad. Why are they purchasing land up in Syria? It makes no sense at all. And when we look at Mecca itself, let me go back here. I'm sorry. Mecca itself, there are no trees there. There's no grapes. There's no pomegranates. There's no grass. There's no nothing. That's just, and actually, there's nothing there anymore besides what they've built right here. Because this region, this area right here is where Mecca supposedly resided. And what do you notice about it?
It's all cemented.
Yeah, it's all cemented over. I got a great picture that I'm going to show here in a minute. So when we look at the locations, just a comparison, we're just going to compare the Quran when it mentions geographical locations to the Gospel of Luke. 65 in the Quran. In the Quran, the Gospel of Luke has 110 alone. It's just one gospel. You have 9 different places named. Luke has 31 places named. It's 6 of those 65, 54 of them are 600 miles north. In the Gospel of Luke, they're right exactly where they are opining where these things happen. In the Quran, they're on the wrong spot. And in the Bible, of course, in the Gospel of Luke, they're all in the right spot. Now, when you compare Quran or the Islam to Zoroastrianism, now there's a reason why I'm doing this, folks. Please, so stay with me on this, okay? Zoroastrianism has had all kinds of influences on Islam. For an example, stoning people for apostasy. We don't find that in the Quran, but we find it in the Hadith literature. And as a matter of fact, they had to invent a Hadith to put it back into the Quran. And it was that story of where a goat ate Aisha's Quran, or a couple pages of her Quran that contained the story of, or the admonition to stone apostates. And what was it? The other one, suckling. Was that the one that has the suckling of
the suckling? Yeah, it's the suckling of your male friends.
That's sick.
That's the perverted Allah.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, if you haven't subscribed to the show yet, go ahead and make sure you subscribe to it and like it, please. Wearing of the veil is not commanded in the Quran. As a matter of fact, the Quran commands women to cover only their bosoms. But in Zoroastrianism, the nobles would require their wives to be veiled in public. And dental hygiene is absolutely crazy in Zoroastrianism. But if you also find Muhammad being obsessed with it, using one of these, what they call a siwak stick. My question is where is Muhammad going to get his stick, his siwak stick, if
In the desert?
in the desert, in Mecca? This is a picture of one of those sticks. I remember seeing some guy from it was on Tom Trento's show. They were making fun of this guy. He was part of the something in southern Florida where he's sitting in this meeting, and I mean he is going to town, really cleaning his teeth with this stick thing. But you get these sticks from this right here. This is a siwak tree. Now, what do you notice about this siwak tree compared to Mecca?
It's green. It's got lots of water.
Right. Yeah. It's a tree. It's a tree in Mecca. No, I'm sorry. You don't get to have. Oh, here it is. This XYZ.
So where would they find this tree?
You would find it in Syria.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Damascus. That makes sense.
Boy, that's kind of.
So they go get the tree, the toothbrush from Syria.
And they would
Wait a
ship
minute,
them down on the trade route. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's right on the trade route.
But you have to have a trade route. You have to have a trade route.
Yeah. We're getting to that. I got all kinds of stuff here. Here's some other problems for history.
Hold on. I got to interrupt her, you silly cappers.
Is somebody talking? I can't hear him.
You hear me?
It's rad. Yeah, I hear him.
I don't hear him.
You don't hear me?
I hear you just fine. But I'm just playing with you. Go ahead. I'm kidding.
Okay. I just want to tell you, silly cappers. See, this is a Quranic miracle. Okay? All right. It's well-known global warming. So, yes, now it's a desert, but this is proof of global warming. Because back in Muhammad's time, all this stuff was true. But now, because of global warming, it's not true. Do you see it's a miracle?
Right. And they used to have flying carpets. This is how Muhammad got north. He'd get on his flying carpet and he would fly up there to Talmud, and that's how we had all these interactions. Exactly. How did I miss that?
Oh, he's got that updraft, to get on that carpet, and it just.
Wow.
Hey, Capper, have you ever heard of a Persian rug before?
Oh, see that?
Okay. Let's see. Here's some other problems with Mecca. It's historical Mecca. Number one, the initial capital of the Umayyads was in Damascus, which is over 1,000 miles away. And then Abbasid Empire, their capital is Baghdad, which is 1,100 miles away. They're way too far away from the holy city. None of the rightly guided caliphs are mentioned anywhere outside of Islamic literature. I mentioned that already. The Quraysh tribe is not mentioned anywhere outside of Islamic literature. Now, why is this important? Okay, so this is important for a couple reasons, but the biggest reason is those gazetteers that I was mentioning. The Sasanian Empire and the Byzantine Empire were at war for 2 centuries, folks. 2 centuries. These people are just duking it out. They're just, one's taking over the other's taking. Anyway, they need people to fight in their army. They need mercenaries to fight. So in order to get these mercenaries, what do you think you're just going to do? Go, pluck somebody off a tree? No, you have to know where to find people to fight in your armies. And you're going to write down, and they have extensive records of and descriptions of specific towns, specific tribes, who they can recruit from. And you guess how many mention the Quraysh tribe? Nobody mentions the Quraysh tribe. Zero. You have zero outside of Islamic literature. You have zero references to the Quraysh. That is, if I'm a Muslim, that is extremely troubling. So the Quraysh aren't mentioned,
especially
anywhere.
because they consider themselves the best ethnically.
Yeah, they're supposed to rule the holy city. They're supposed to be in charge of everything. They're supposed to be respected amongst all the other tribes, that they would allow them to rule the holy city, which is a bunch of bunk to begin with.
Well, they are the original white supremacists. So
say that again?
You're not wrong.
They are the original white supremacists. Actually, when it comes to slavery and all that stuff, it was the colorization that the Arabs added to it. No, seriously, that is documented. They colorized slavery. There was a different use for black slaves as opposed to white slaves. White slaves were for the house and for your sexual pleasure, or to serve in your army, whereas black slaves were just basically castrated labor. Okay, I mean, seriously, they definitely distinguish between the two colors of people, and that determined what level of slavery or servitude you would serve.
I know that the trans-Saharan slave trade from Africa into going east was absolutely brutal. And you're right. We're not talking about just castration. We're getting off topic, but the bottom line is we're not talking about just castration. We're talking about complete removal. And without any type of anesthetic or what?
Again, new science of transsexualism. They were doing this. This is all just wonderful miracles of Islam. I'm telling you, they were ahead of the science before the science.
Oh boy!
See, we're societal pioneers.
That's all.
There we go.
That was their solution. Just chop it off.
And they wouldn't treat them. I mean, a lot of these 90%, almost 90% of the people taken in slavery going east died en route. 90%. And we think of how brutal the transatlantic slave trade was. That's 10 to 15%. As terrible and brutal as that is, you get 90%. And, you have, people from the Nation of Islam sit there and want to preach to, us descendants of the colonial European. Have you looked and seen what your people, it's just absolutely, anyway. All right, let's get back to this. I don't want to get off on that. Okay. So, and you have, here you have a writing in Tabari, who is the historian for Islam. He talks about people coming from Medina, entering Mecca from the south. So what they would do is they would come from Medina and they would go south of Mecca and then come up. And then he also talks about when the people from the Quraysh attacked Medina, they were going north to Medina and attacking it from this direction. And that makes no sense unless Mecca was originally somewhere up here. So if you're going to go from Medina to Mecca, you would enter it from the south. If you're going to attack Mecca, if you're going to attack Medina from Mecca, you would go south to it. But if it's down here, that does not make any sense at all. So what are they doing with Mecca today? Well, if we look at Mecca today has been basically excavated and covered over in cement. They built this big clock tower there. That's the world's 4th largest building, and it has the largest clock face on it. It's, the purpose behind it is to replace Greenwich Mean Time, Big Ben clock in England, with Arab Mean Time, which would completely transform the world's timing pieces on it. But when we look at the southern expansion, what they're doing is they're basically destroying the evidence. Now look here, this is where Khadijah's house was, and this is supposed to be the birthplace right here of Muhammad. But I want to show you something, a picture I ran across today. I don't have it. Hold on. I'm not going to do it. I'll get to it, I promise you. But it shows how deep they had to dig in order to get to build these skyscrapers. It'll blow your mind. Okay, so was Mecca known in the 7th century? The obvious answer is no. And we know, and if you look in the literature of these empires, for example, this Syrian Empire, and Syrian Empire, of course, this was the empire that carried off the northern kingdoms of Israel in the 7th 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries, or 8th century BC. The Assyrians don't mention it. You have the Babylonian Empire. They don't mention it. You have the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, we have all of the writings from all of these people, like Strabo, Pliny the Elder, Ptolemy. We've talked about Ptolemy. We did a whole show on Ptolemy. If you want to use Ptolemy as Ptolemy mentions Mecca, if you want to try that, go ahead. Come up on some of your request it there in chat, and I'll send you the link, and we can talk about that. We have the Persian Empire, which became later the Sasanian Empire. They don't mention it. What about closer empires? Well, when you look at the Nabatean Empire, which is to the north, they don't mention Mecca. You have the Sabians to the south. They don't mention Mecca. You have the Himar. You know, I have this written down. Hold on just a second. Let me, because these guys, these civilizations here, folks, it's absolutely nuts what they do mention. For example, let's see here, the Nabatean, we have lists of kings from the Nabatean Empire. We have lists of the wars that they fought. We have lists of the extent of trade that they engaged in, to include the locations. Let's see, the Himyar Empire. Here you have several of the rulers were Jewish themselves. We have all kinds of documents describing the lives of their kings. We have inscriptions on buildings and dams that describe this kingdom. We have all kinds of records where they traded with caravans going through that region with them. And then you have the Kinda. Is that up here? The Zidi, where's the Kinda? Here's the Kinda Empire. The Kinda Empire, you have, let's see, several kings listed. We have, you have descriptions of interactions they had with you have descriptions of this kingdom interacting with this kingdom here. But none of these empires mention Mecca. The Qadarites, I can't remember how you pronounce that. Let's see here. I don't have any, but they don't mention Mecca at all. And then you have, of course, these empires, these African empires here to the west of Mecca. None of them mention Mecca at all. Now, when we look at the cities, we've already talked about Najran, but that's mentioned by Strabo, Pliny, Ptolemy, Aretas. You have Sana, Taif, Yathreb. Those are in Greek trading documents. You have Petra is mentioned in separate documents. Marib is mentioned in separate documents. All of these supposedly insignificant towns and places are mentioned in documents that do not originate from those locations, but yet we have a plethora of them. Now, when we look at Mecca, the location of it is in relation to other cities. We know Aden has a big history. We have Sana has a rich history. Najran has a rich history. Taif has a rich history. Yathrib, we have all kinds of evidence for these towns, Tabuk, Petra, and Gaza. But Mecca, we do not. And the reason why is look where it's located, folks. This is a plateau. Now, this is where you're supposed to supposedly have this trade route. In order for Mecca to be part of this trade route, you have to come off of that plateau. Here's a contour map that demonstrates this. So here you have a trade route going across the plateau all the way up to Gaza. But if you put Mecca here, look at this. Look at Mecca is 3,000 feet, folks. 3,000 feet off the plateau, meaning that you have to go 3,000 feet down and 3,000 feet up just to get to Mecca, which doesn't have any water. Why are you going there? What made that the mother of all cities? The first mention of Mecca is in this book, Apocalypse of Pseudo-Malthadius, Continuato, or Tenitio, how do you pronounce it? Byzantia Arabica.
Ashio. Ashio, I think it is.
Okay. And this is 741. When did Muhammad die? 632. This is written 109. The first mention of Mecca isn't for over 100 years after the death of Muhammad. 100 years. before Muhammad shows up in any of the literature at all. Or I'm sorry, Mecca does. When we think of maps, Mecca does not show up until 900 AD. That is what, 268 years after the death of Muhammad. And Patricia Corona, if you haven't gotten this book yet, I don't have it, and I went to buy it, but the thing is $90, I think. I'm going to cite it here in a couple minutes, but she goes ahead and goes through all of these trading documents that refers to the towns that were on that map, but none of them ever mentioned Mecca, which is very important. When we look at the different maps of that area, of that region, Mecca is not on a 2nd century map. Here's another 2nd century map. Mecca's not there.
Hey, Eric, what's the name of the Patricia Crone's book? 'Cause I know she's got
something about the rise of Hijrism, Islamic trade and the rise of Hijrism. I have it cited here. I'll give you the exact title here in a minute. Here, Mecca is not on this map either. Here's a 7th century map. No Mecca. Here's another 7th century map. No Mecca. In other words, Mecca does not appear on any maps prior to the 7th century. It's as a matter of fact, it's not the first appearance it has on a map is 900 AD. Okay, so here it is right here. Meccan trade and the rise of Islam. Here's where Patricia Corona debunks this notion of Mecca being on the trade route. She first starts off with the commodities. What commodities are there out there for them to trade in such an inhospitable environment? Prior to the 7th century, you had a big trade in incense coming from India because of paganism, but after Christianity dominated the region, there was no more need for incense. And so the only thing that they would turn to is low value commodities such as dates, leather, and salt. And you're not going to build an empire by using dates, leather, and salt. So this idea put forth, this trade route theory put forth by Montgomery Watts, is debunked by Patricia Corona. She debunked it because she shows on a map here. Here's the map. Here's what Montgomery Watts was postulating. Goods would come from India through the Arabian Sea up through the Persian Gulf and into the Sassanid or the Persian Empire, and then across the Persian Empire into the Byzantine Empire, and then sold throughout Europe. However, when you had the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire go to war for 2 centuries, all of that fell apart. So in order to subvert that, the idea is that they would come across the Arabian Sea, and then they would be offloaded into Aden here, and they would be shipped up to Gaza. And they would get to Taif, come off the plateau, go down to Mecca, back up to Tabuk, I think it is. I can't remember what name of that town is right there. Maybe it's Khaybar. I can't remember. Anyway, and then go up to Gaza and go out that way. But when you look, or it's Yathrib, I'm sorry, Tabuk is up here. So when you look at this, remember, Mecca is on a plateau. It's 3,000 feet off there. So you can't, this is why Patricia Corona was able to debunk this, because you're not going to have people offload goods in Aden, transported across the most inhospitable environment possible up to Gaza, when all you have to do is just keep it on the boat. And you have all kinds of ports on the western side of the Red Sea to get it up there. It makes absolutely no sense to transport it across land when you can keep it on a boat and have it go up the Red Sea. So she tore Montgomery Watts' theory completely to shreds, and she was able to debunk it by using documents, source documents. When we look at the cities along the western coast of Africa, I'm sorry, the eastern coast of Africa, western coast of Arabia, and the Red Sea, we have documents supporting all of these cities. Here's these port cities prior to Muhammad, prior to Mecca, and none of them mention, the documents that we have from them mention Mecca. But all of these dates here, they predate Islam, and they're all within one day's journey of each other. And when you think of Yambu, that which is supposed to start Yathrib, and when you think of Jeddah, that didn't exist in the 7th century. There's no record of Jeddah, which is supposed to support Mecca. That didn't exist in the 7th century. So the bottom line is that the trade did not go along the western coast of Arabia. It went up the Red Sea. So this idea that Mecca was this mother of all cities that supposedly trade went through it is completely incorrect. Not only is it not on the trade route, but number two, it's 3,000 feet off of the plateau. And number three, it has no water. So there's no way that Mecca is going to be part of any trade route theory. Okay, so why don't we have any history in Mecca? Look at these pictures, and you already alluded to this. Look at these pictures. They're bleak. Why? Because they're in a desert. And the soil there has never been able to support any vegetation. Why is that important? Why? Well, here's the reason why. Because, hold on, let me get up to it. Mecca, if we look at Mecca, Mecca is supposed to, if there's no vegetation, you're not going to have any people. I think this is Jay Smith's slide here. Here it is. Okay. So, number one, where there is a desert, there's no water. Where there is no water, there is no food. Where there is no food, there are no people. Where there are no towns, there are no cities. Where there are no cities, there's no civilization. Where there's no civilization, there's no history. Where there's no history, you don't have Islam. That's the bottom, and that's the easiest way to debunk this idea of Mecca being this mother of all cities and existing in the 7th century as part of the trade route. If you look at the Zamzam well in Mecca is a joke. Let's look at this really quick. I'm going to try to go fast here because I still have quite a bit to do. Here's what we know about the well itself. Here's the oldest picture of the well in the 1800s. It was about 30 feet wide. Here's a 1950s look, looking down into it. Here in 1953, they're drawing water by hand. Then they built a building over the top of it because it was such a popular shrine. But then in 1963, they put the well underground. Where the Muslims walk around the Kaaba today, which is over here. It's actually on a platform. It's not on the original site. So if you look here today, here's where the Zamzam well is. Okay, so here's the big problem. In 1963, when they moved the well underground, they dug it deeper to 31 meters. But yet it's only 21 meters from the Kaaba. Now, if you remember, the history behind the Zamzam well was what? Well, this is supposed to commemorate Hagar running in between the hills of Safa and Marwa because she's been cast out by Abraham. Well, when we look at the Zamzam well, that's only 21. That's 60 feet from the Kaaba, folks. Why don't you have Ishmael go say, "Hey, Ma, come back inside. Come back in." You're not cast out into the desert if you're only 60 feet from the Kaaba. That's an impossibility.
Wait, what?
Here.
Well, you have to look at it this way. They're saying their claim is that Abraham built that building and that it would have been a place that he had been. So when they kicked out Hagar, that was the claim that she only went X amount of feet away. That's not a kick out. That's I'm going on a little vacation and I'll be back in a few minutes.
She's not even going, folks. This is only 60 feet away from the Kaaba. Don't you think if the Kaaba was supposed to be this critical, important place, that somebody would have been able to give her a cup of water within that vicinity? This story makes zero sense, and it's going to make
probably no water there. I say that.
Well, it's going to make even less sense here in just a second.
Wait, aren't the hills of Marwan? Aren't they just like piles of rocks? They're like a few feet tall.
Here,
okay,
I'm showing you right here. This is the slide. Safa and Marwa are supposed to be mountains. Hagar ran in between. Now here's Safa, and here's Marwa. I think I have that right. Let me make sure.
They don't look very big.
They're 400 folks. They're 450 feet apart. That's a football field and a half. And if you run in between them 7 times, that like tradition holds, you're running about 2 miles. 2 miles in between them. Safa is 65 feet tall. Marwa is 75 feet tall.
And that's a mountain to them.
Those are supposed to be mountains. Not these mountains out here. No, not this mountain. No, not this. No. These are mountains right here.
Hey, Adam was taller than the mountains.
Adam was tall. You're exactly right. Adam
He was 90 feet tall.
There you go. So these things aren't mountains. They're just big. Now they're big. I know they're rocks and big rocks, granted, but these things are not mountains. So in other words, Hagar is running in between 2 rocks in her own backyard. If we were to believe the standard Islamic narrative is that this is where Hagar did this.
She was out for a jog.
And she might have been. I hope she took her pepper spray, because you never know what's out there in the middle of the desert. Or if you're going on the Hajj, that's the most dangerous place to be a female. And here's what, okay, so here's Safa, here's Marwa, or I can't remember which one is. One of those, it's either Safa or Marwa, one of the two. And then here's the Zamzam well. How much sense does that make? That makes zero sense. No sense. No sense.
But it's Islam, so it doesn't have to make sense.
And this is,
and you don't have to think about it either.
And this is a picture of this building right here from this side right over here. This right here. So it's not, you can see it's not very high at all. I mean, these rocks are not that big.
No, it sounds like my childhood playground in the valley.
Did you have to go looking for water when you did that?
Oh, that was about the river.
Oh, okay. Well, then you didn't. Okay. So you didn't have to run in between them. That's good to hear. Okay. Now there are rescuing devices that Muslims come up with, and this is, and some of them are legitimate. The absence of evidence is not evidence. Ptolemy and Makaraba, Diodorus in the temple, and you have Psalm 84 referring to the Valley of Mecca. But when we look, doggone it, I didn't do these right. But anyway, okay, so when we look at this argument for the absence of evidence, this is a true statement, but it's not applicable. And here's why. When we look at the argument, it's just because you have looked for the evidence and you have not found it doesn't mean that it isn't there. You just haven't found it yet. And that's a true statement. But the problem is right here. Islamic scholars are not looking for this evidence. They've destroyed it. They've graded over and cemented over it. When you look at other towns that are nearby, they have evidence, mountains of evidence supporting them, such as Najran. But nothing exists for Mecca. And the bottom line, and another bottom line is right here. You cannot get better conditions for the preservation of that evidence. But look at this picture here, folks. When they are building these skyscrapers, right here, this is ground level right here. Look how much further down you have to dig in order to lay the foundation for those buildings. When they dug all the way down here, if Mecca is indeed this city, this ancient city. Now, I'm going to put this back up here in a second. But think about this. If Mecca is indeed this ancient city that has existed since the time of Adam and Eve, whatever, or Abraham and Ishmael supposedly built the Kaaba or rebuilt the Kaaba. There's got to be something in that 30, 40 feet going down that they excavated to build these buildings. And there's nothing. They have found nothing. And the reason why they have found nothing is because nothing is there. If they would have found something, you know darn good and well that you would have every Dawagandist saying, here's the coin. We found this coin. It dates clear back to the 5th century.
They didn't even bother. You know, what's really bad is if they had, had some imagination, they could have planted crap. But they were too afraid that everybody else would figure it out. But
I tell you, the easiest place that they could go, I've posted this all over these discussions that I've had with people in Facebook. The easiest place to find archaeological evidence would be to go down to the Zamzam well. That thing it sits right. I mean, you would find all kinds of pottery because people drop those pots all the time when they're walking down those steps. You slip, you fall, there goes a pot. And I go home, get another one, come back and fill it up. That would be easy, but they haven't done that. And the reason why they haven't done that is because there's nothing there.
Nothing there. Yes.
Not a thing. But again, let me put this picture back up here. Look how deep they have to dig for this thing. Look at how far down they have to dig in order to build these skyscrapers. Imagine how far they had.
It's about another 10 stories down below, at least.
I don't know, but I mean, just think about how far they would have had to dig for that big clock tower, the world's largest building. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's about 20 stories below, I believe.
Okay, Ptolemy and Makaraba. Ptolemy, of course, we did a whole show on him. If you want to go back, it's on Bob the Builder's Speaker's Corners channel. Again, find the evidence for Mecca, and I dare you. Ptolemy never visited Arabia in his lifetime.
I double dog dare you. Double dog.
Okay, thank you for upping the ante on that one, Red. Thank you. When we look at Mecca, according to Ptolemy's map, he places Mecca east of Medina. And when we look at a map, Mecca is located west of Medina. Now, both of them are south.
Hey, Brad, I know you said double dog, but that might turn a Muslim off. So maybe double Aisha. I don't know.
Okay. When we look at Dr. Patricia Corona compared Mecca and Makaraba to one another, and they are etymologically different, meaning their origins are different. They have nothing to do with one another. Here's what she writes. And she writes 15 and reads and speaks 15 different archaic languages. She says the plain truth is that the name Makaraba has nothing to do with Mecca, and the location indicated by Ptolemy for Makaraba is in no way dictates identification of the two.
Absolutely, yes.
And the other thing is that nobody else mentions Makaraba in any other ancient documents. The only place that it occurs is in Ptolemy's 2nd century document, where he mentions this city, and the city is placed in the wrong area if it's supposed to be Mecca. So when we look at the people that did write about that region where Mecca is located, they all say, everyone says, who opines upon it anyway, says that it's uninhabitable. You can't live there. Why can't you live there? No water.
No water.
No water's there. Okay. The other one is Diodorus in the temple. Diodorus mentions a tribe in Arabia that all the Arabs worship. So therefore, that's got to be the Quraysh and the Kaaba in Mecca, right? No, wrong. This includes the Arabs up in the Transjordan region, and the Sinai is where he's referring to. And he's referring to this group of people right here. I don't know how to pronounce that. The Banizamenes. Do you not pronounce that?
Banizamenes.
Something like that. These guys are 500 miles away from Mecca. That's who Diodorus is referring to. So when we look at these rescuing devices, whether it's absence of evidence, Ptolemy, Diodorus, it all falls apart. Why? Because this tribe right here is clear up by the Nabatean region. And we find this in the Dictionary of Roman and Greek Geography. So this, unless they're a bunch of Islamophobes themselves and wanted to try to eradicate Meccan history, you're going to have to make that argument against their Islamophobia. And then lastly, I've seen this argument where it says Becca, the Valley of Becca. And when we think of Psalm 84, as David writes that. But both of them mention Becca, but the Psalm mentions the Valley of Becca. And we think of David. David is writing over 700 miles away about, and if you're trying to, I mean, this, again, here's credulity. This stretches credulity. You're trying to say that David, writing 700 miles away from Mecca, let's see, he would have been 1,000 BC, 1,600 years before Muhammad. I'm sorry, that just does not work out. When we look at verse 1, it says, "How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty." Where is the dwelling place of God? Well, that's in Jerusalem. That's where they had the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat. It goes on to say a place near your altar. Where's the altar of God? And it's right there in Jerusalem. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. Where is the house of God? Well, at this time of David's writing, this is where they kept the Ark of the Covenant in a tent. Solomon had not yet built the first temple. But here you have those who dwell in your house. And then you have whose hearts are set on a pilgrimage. The Jews used to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem all the time. And then you have they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. Mecca gets 4 inches of rainfall a year. The majority of it falls during early winter, which would be February and March. That's when the majority of it falls. Notice a place of springs, the autumn rains. So it's even the season is wrong for Mecca. And then it says they go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. And Zion is a term used for Jerusalem. And when we look at here, this pilgrimage, if they were going to make this pilgrimage, that would be 750 miles down to Mecca and 750 miles back up to Jerusalem. And you're going to try to tell us that this Mecca is supposed to be Mecca? Again, credulity. People are crazy. So I'm going to end it right there. I'm not going to make any conclusions about this because I want Paul to go ahead and present what he was going to present. But the bottom line is, folks, is that this idea that Mecca did not exist in the 7th century. It's not even an idea. The idea that Mecca did exist in the 7th century is an invention. This is an invention of what many people believe the Umayyad Caliphate developed. But the fact is that there's no evidence. There's no evidence supporting the existence of Mecca at the time of Muhammad, period. If there is evidence for it, all right. Well, thank you. I just emailed me a PDF of, where'd it go? I like that a lot. Thank you. There's no evidence of Mecca existence at the time of Muhammad. And if Mecca did not exist at the time of Muhammad, then where was Muhammad operating from? Where's the Hijra cave? Where is where do we find him going to the Kaaba to worship? Where do we find him going to the Kaaba to destroy those? All of these stories that we hear about Muhammad in Mecca, they couldn't have existed. So therefore, the Quran is wrong. If the Quran is wrong, so is Muhammad, and so is Islam itself. Okay, I've talked long enough, I think. Paul has something to add here. So I'm going to add your screen, and you go ahead while I take some water.
Okay. So I was asked to put something together on the Hijra, and basically that's the word for migration in Arabic. And this is because of what's been happening. At the very least, I say since 2015, we've been noticing this super high, large volume of Muslims trying to take over Europe. And it's here in the United States as well. So, and it's in Canada, and it's all over the world right now. They're trying. It's a huge move to get out of their countries. It's not a push to leave and make things better for themselves, although that's what it's being portrayed as. They're calling them. If you go to Europe, they call them economic migrants. They do not call them refugees. There's reasons they are not refugees, huge cultural differences. But let's talk about what the Hijra is all about. By the way, for those of you, does anybody know what happened in North Dakota this week?
Yeah, they're planning on
North Dakota.
4 cops were killed.
North Dakota, 4 cops?
Well, and
they were shot. Four were shot. 1 was killed.
Oh,
right?
1 was killed. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is this it here, Paul?
Muhammad killed. No, it's not in here. I'm going to bring it up because this is all about. The Hijra is all about jihad, and I'm going to prove that. But I want you to think about that. That just happened in North Dakota this week. The guy wanted to kill. He had 180,000 rounds on him. And he couldn't get to the place where there was, it was 1,800 rounds. Actually, not 180. It was 1,800 rounds of ammunition. And he couldn't get to the place where he was going to go. So he decided to take out cops. And that's just scary. So let's talk about this. If you take a look at these pictures, the vast majority are men. I was there in 2016. The vast majority of these Muslims, there are very, very, very few women and even less children. So if anybody who's telling you this is all, it's both women and children, they're lying through their teeth. All right, let's get going here. In the United States, we had this start with bringing Somalians here. We've had serious issues. A friend of mine, he used to run the Catholic Family Services Refugee Resettlement Program here in Rochester. He quit after the Somalians came in because they did not want to work, and it destroyed his reputation. And it's just like he would send them out, and they would purposely do things to get fired because they just wanted to collect a jizya check. He didn't know that, but that was what was happening. And this is just one place where they're demonstrating against public schools because they want halal food. But, the funny thing is, according to Sharia, all you have to do is pronounce Allah's name over it and you can eat it. All right, let's take a look at what the hadiths say about the Hijra. This is Kitab al-Mathal, reported by Timri. I charge you 5 of what Allah has charged me with: to assemble, to listen, to obey, to immigrate, and to wage jihad for the sake of Allah. Then the Quran says this, Surah 2:18, surely those who believed and those who emigrated and performed jihad. Surah 8:72, surely those who believed and those who emigrated and performed jihad. Listen to this part: with their money and their lives for the sake of Allah and those who gave asylum. So, it's okay. You can perform jihad with your money. You can pay for other people to go on jihad. You're supposed to get the same benefits. Again, you have to emigrate to do this. Right. I recommend buying this book. This is Usama's Quran. He has a new one coming out. You may want to wait for that because I just heard last night the reason why he's been updating his Quran is because somebody said to him it's an evil Quran. He says, look, I'll give you an evil Quran. And last night he announced one of the things he's doing is, the word nikah is no longer translated as marriage in his new Quran. It is translated how it's supposed to be translated. It's the F word.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I got a funny story on that real quick that I want to tell you. I'm sure Eric knows about. During the Iraqi occupation, U.S. Central Command, they came up with an idea, because as Eric, as you know, the military does everything in acronyms. They came up with this brilliant idea to get the Iraqi people to go back to work and help them. And the acronym spelled out NICA. And the soldiers that were handing this stuff out, it literally said, help U.S. NICA Iraq. Okay? And they were handing this stuff out there. And they couldn't figure out why these Iraqis, they were just getting really pissed when they handed them out. And somebody kind of told them, funny stuff.
If you remember those gazetters that I mentioned about, that would be given to military commanders so they would know who to recruit, where to go, what the social norms, what the cultural norms was, and how not to offend that culture. Our intelligence agents, our military MI guys would have been best to read one of them things before we went in there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's what my that's what my last book is really on. I should have read that. All right, let's get into this. Here's the thing I want to say is these verses, they repeat almost word for word, and that just is another show and tell that you can't trust the Quran as reliable literature. Quran Surah 874, and those who believed and emigrated and performed jihad for the sake of Allah. 875, and those who believed and afterwards and emigrated and performed jihad. What's the purpose of the Hijra? That's what emigrated is. This is the word Hijra. But what is the purpose? Jihad. Let's look at Sahih Bukhari. The Prophet said, the reward of deeds and on intentions, and every person will get the reward according to what he intends. So whoever migrated for Allah and his apostle has migration for the will be for Allah and his apostle, and whoever migrated for worldly benefits or for marrying a woman, it probably says Nika there, then his migration will be for what he migrated to. Again, next one. The prophets, this is from Umar bin al-Khattab, from Sahih Bukhari 2529. The prophet said the reward deeds depend on intentions, and every person will get the reward according to what he intends. So whoever migrated for Allah and his apostle, his migration will be for Allah and his apostle. Whoever migrated for worldly benefits, marrying a woman. Again, if you're doing this for Allah, that means you're doing it for jihad. Please understand that. That's what that exactly means. Muslims will know that. Average person will not. Here we go again. Sahih Bukhari. This is 2783. Ibn Abbas narrated this. Allah's apostle said, there is no Hijra from Mecca to Medina after the conquest of Mecca, but jihad and good intention. So now you understand. There is no going to a non-Muslim country without the intent of jihad. This is what their literature says to them. I'm not quoting anyone else but their literature. We go. Sahih Bukhari 4309. I said to Ibn Umar, this is narrated in Mujahid. I said to Ibn Umar, I want to migrate to Sham. He said, there is no migration but jihad for Allah's cause. You hear that? They put the two together. Go and offer yourself for jihad, and if you find opportunity for jihad, stay there. Think about that. These are the people moving into your homes, moving into your areas, and just think about the 100,000 plus. So it was about 120,000 they brought here from Afghan without vetting. Think about that. Afghanistan, they came with their child brides. They came with their deep beliefs in Islam, and they don't speak a word of English, some of them. All right. Now, this is the problem. The counterterrorism manuals are wrong. And this is a counterterrorism trends analysis. It's a professional journal that intelligence analysts will read, and it's full of crap. The concept, it says here, the concept of Hijra represents Prophet Muhammad's migration from Mecca to Medina. Again, this is way off. Is of great importance to Islam. Okay, yes, there was a migration. Again, that's what the word means, but they don't understand. The Prophet migrated to Medina because Muslims face persecution. No, he migrated to Medina because he wanted to start a war against Mecca. That's what it says in the Siras. If you read the Siras, you discover that. Again, these people who wrote this had no clue. Consequently, mainstream Islamic discourse, Hijra constitutes moving from Dar al-Harb to Dar al-Islam. Catch that part. They got that one right. Dar al-Harb, which literally means house of war, refers to lands where Islamic law is not implemented or where Muslims do not enjoy the freedom to practice their religion. That's close to accurate. Conversely, Dar al-Islam, which literally means house of Islam, refers to areas under the rule of Islam. It does not mean peace, people. It's this rule of Islam is Sharia, where Sharia is implemented. If you're in a Muslim country where Sharia isn't implemented, you're not in Dar al-Islam, is what they're saying. The traditional meaning of Hijra is only Muslims who are unable to practice Islam or face opposition. Listen to this last part. Islamic State, however, has exploited the concept of Hijra. This is where it's really, really wrong, to attract foreign fighters. In a detailed examination of all published issues of Debunking, the article seeks to unravel the aspects of Hijra introduced by the Islamic State. It argues that while Islamic State advocates for traditional Hijra from Dar al-Harb to Dar al-Islam, the group has interpreted the application of the concept more broadly in order to widen its support base. Okay, truth of the matter here. Throughout history, and you can find this especially in historical documents on India, where the England was in, and they were taking care of things the best they thought they could, and they documented where one Muslim group would insult another Muslim group, and they would call the other ones apostates. Then those people that were with them would have to migrate to them, and then they could make war and kill the other ones off. And that's exactly what happened. They have several documented cases of that. I have the history books on that have been written. They're from the 1800s, and you sit here and you're reading this and like, whoa. Okay, so it's, like I say, and Eric's talking about historicity, finding the books that talk about the time period, not just trusting one source or two sources, find the extra sources that are outside. Again, this is a flat denial of historical campaigns. This is just unbelievable. This one really ticks me off. I Counter Extremism Project, they have no clue. They wrote, in a modern extremist concept, the term Hijra has been used to describe a foreign fighter's journey from his or her country of origin to a terrorist-held opportunities. Again, the purpose of a Hijra is to take part in jihad. They don't understand, and they don't want anybody else to understand that. So they put this misinformation out saying, oh, well, we know more about Islam than they do. I'm sorry. These guys are ignorant cusses, and they're trying to by not putting out the truth, they're putting every country in the world in danger. And I think this particular group is dangerous to this country, especially in all of Europe. I mean, historically erroneous. You can find this, anyone. It doesn't take a genius to find out how historically erroneous this is. All right.
The purpose of that entire scam was that countering extremism thing was a scam to begin with. It was just to whitewash what was going on with.
And it's still going on, by the way. That's catch. So let me play this, and you hear it from Islamic scholars.
Anyone who knows that they have the ability to migrate, go to their home country, where they originate from, where they will be open hand, people, their community and their families are ready to take them back in, and stays in the lands of the Muslims. He's he's sinning by remaining in that land. By the way, every single day that he stays in that land, he's sinning. You are giving your children to who? To the enemies who are going to destroy your child's mindset and thinking. There are 4,500 Muslim heritage children in care in Britain. These children are of Muslim. Keep in mind, these are Muslim children. They've been taken from their families, and their reason for this is that the child has gone through abuse and neglect, family breakdown, a parent or child's illness or disability, and lack of family support. And then they say the vast majority are removed by social services on account of harm or profound risk of harm. This child, they're saying, this child has been taken from his parents, maybe because she was forcing him to pray Salah at Fajr time.
Maybe because she was abusing him.
This child, who's Ahmed, he can be taken care of at LGBT family. The West today we have an issue of morality and dignity issue against them. For example, homosexuality. Hence why we're saying to the people, leave the UK. Because however good you are, they are more than you. They influence you. The ocean takes you.
So understand that while this is being said, yes, you can make a hijra to an Islamic country if you're Muslim. That is the only place you're allowed to go. The only reason you go to the Western countries is for the purpose of jihad. So what's actually happening in Europe today is these people who, that Western folk like the United States people will call refugees. They send their children to be educated in their homelands. I'm talking about Syrians. I'm talking about Iraqis. I'm talking about all these places you consider dangerous. Somalians. In Sweden, they're sending them back, okay, and they've given them, people have gotten refugee status, and they get caught sending all their kids back. I'm sorry, remove their refugee status. All right, here we go. Mufti Q&A on this.
What countries can we go to? Is moving to another country in Europe also considered hijrah, or does it have to be an Arabic/African country? Excuses. If you already made a video about the subject, I would look it up. Salam alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. If you live in Belgium and you feel that the hijrah is mandatory, as some of the ulama of Islam explain, they say it's absolutely mandatory, regardless whether you can practice your religion or not, regardless whether you can take pride in your religion or not, regardless whether you're persecuted or not. Many of the ulama of Islam, they say that hijrah, leaving the lands of kufr and shirk, is mandatory. Mutlaqan, absolutely. And the concept of increasing the numbers of the people of kufr and shirk, living under their banner, living under their welfare, of their care, their kind treatment and care, living among these people, they say that that's haram, period. And that is something which clearly infringes al-wala wal-bara. And you can't do it. It's the view of some of the ulama of Islam. And they have proofs.
So I'm going to stop this here.
What countries can we go to? Moving to another.
The reason I'm stopping that is he's saying you got to go to your home country. Notice he isn't doing it. He's staying there. Go, send your children back. I mean, again, the reason they came was for jihad, and they hadn't taken. Again, what were they doing? They were using their money at the very least. They were doing something called civilization jihad. Here's an example of that.
Hey,
this
Paul,
is from Sweden.
Paul,
yes.
Paul, real quick,
yes.
We got about 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Let me skip down here. All right. Let me leave with this piece here. This is by Al-Faruqi, and he is the big guy for the United States. He was murdered, but he was one of the first to make a hijra here. We are here to stay, he says. We are here to plant Islam in this part of the world, and we must utilize everything in our power to make the world of Allah supreme. In the presence of living here, we can become ambassadors of Islam. Allah has carved out a vocation for you and a new mission. And this mission is to save the West, to save the humanity of the West by converting that humanity to Islam. We want to live henceforth as if we were muhajirs, companions of Muhammad from Mecca to Medina. So let us invest our hijrah with this new meaning, and let us appoint ourselves as ambassadors of Islam. This is the guy who is one of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood here in the United States until that was done with. Until he died, I should say. And this is just he was here in the United States. He came to Canada. Then he came here. His purpose is to create a group that would attack America from within, and he did it. And he gave this speech in England.
Okay? So is this guy affiliated with the explanatory memorandum?
He would have been around for that.
Okay, so
I think he might have been. He might have been around for that. He would have been in the original planning stages because he's one of the founders of the Muslim Brotherhood here in the United States.
Okay, so
and the FBI know who he is and everything. So yes.
Okay, so is this one of the guys that was thrown into prison originally, or no?
No, he's long before. He came in the 1960s. Those guys came a little bit later, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right. Now, was it CARE? Not CARE. Which group had all their leaders thrown into prison? Was that CARE?
That is the Holy Land Foundation.
There you go. Okay, yeah.
Trial. They were formed as a result of the work of he's one of the original guys who Ismail Al-Faruqi is one. It's his work that created a lot of these organizations. So yeah, he gets the credit for it. Long dead at this point. One of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is this man's student, who is Muhammad Shafiq out of Rochester, New York.
Oh, were you guys neighbors or what?
No, he decided that he would bring the Muslim Brotherhood into Nazareth College. And
oh, that's
what
right.
got
You
me
told me
woke up.
that. Yeah, you told me about this.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this man's student is the reason I do what I do.
Which and okay, just briefly, what did you have to do with that at college? You had to go in there and participate. What did you do again?
I was a grad student. I graduated there with a master's, and that's just the fact that they actually took 500 grand from an organization called the International Institute of Islamic Thought, and then they decided that we put a test before them. Will you take? We have a former Holocaust. We have a Holocaust speaker, a survivor. Will you allow them to speak at the college? And Dr. Shafiq and the president of the college refused him.
Really?
Yeah, and we were providing everything for them. As a patriot group, we were standing behind, and doing everything we could financially provide for them to make that happen.
Oh, that's incredible. I mean, to think that everything post-Holocaust, you would think, I don't know, you would just think that people would have got the clue when 6 million people get fried and sent to gas chambers and thrown into ovens and things of that nature.
They don't want people to know that's part of civilization, John. They want to change history. You're going to go check your kids' textbooks out. They're being changed. They're now claiming that Islam created calligraphy. They're now claiming that it created the astrolabe. I can go on and on and on, and Eric can verify what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
It's being changed.
Okay, look, I got to run. Got church here.
Cold close.
I'm on it. I mean, what do you act like I've never gotten to do this before? What was that, Issa?
We don't want to miss it this time.
No, really. Okay. Karen in the chat, and who was the other guy that sent me a video dealing with oh my gosh, where did I just had it up here. He sent me, I checked my email and I saw it in there. What was this guy's name?
I just want to tell everybody I'm going to be at the apologetics conference with Hatun. So
that's
in
next
Ohio.
week. Next week, right? First week of August.
It's first week of August. Yeah, I'm going to be there with Usama. Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. This guy, okay, I got your link. Thank you, Karen Thompson in chat. Thank you for sending me those. You sent me the Usama's Quran. You sent me Patricia Corona's PDF. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate you taking the time to send that out to me. Everybody else that's participated in chat, thank you for coming. Panel, of course, you guys are always welcome, and I appreciate what you do. Thank you for your presentation today, Paul. Sending me some messages of some ideas for next Sunday. Excuse me. And if not, then we'll talk about Mecca again. That's always a great topic, and there's so much there to learn. Everybody, God bless you, and we will see you next week on the Cross and the Crescent discussion group.
Advanced student and specialist, that the standard narrative has holes. That's what
that the Muslims were rioting against one another. And as much as we don't want to face the fact, the Muslims were lying sometimes. They were fabricating, they were embellishing, and that might be hard to accept, but that is a reality.